Now then everyone, welcome to the Wedding Mavericks podcast with Lyndsey and Jules, a podcast for wedding videographers and photographers where we discuss all aspects of running a business, developing technical knowledge and skills, and pushing your creativity.
This week we are talking about a topic that I know so many creative and camera-based business owners really struggle with. It's pricing. Ooh. It's one of the most challenging things to be able to establish in an industry which is unregulated. It can be the thing that business owners are most secretive about. Certainly when it comes to sharing their information with peers within the same industry.
Yeah.
But getting your pricing right is so important for the success and the growth of your business. But as well, if we all get it right, it's something that can encourage growth within the whole market, within the whole industry.
Yep.
In fact, based on some of the research that we have done recently, pricing is one of the least considered, would you believe, aspects of actually running a business within this industry. But it's the thing that's got the ability to absolutely completely transform the success, but the growth as well of your business. And it's because of the opportunities to increase your revenue that you could begin to enjoy just by reassessing, making adjustments to the pricing strategy that you have.
Yep.
Now it's something that's particularly relevant to what we do as wedding photographers and videographers, because unless you are going to scale your business by employing other people to shoot weddings under your name, under your company name,
yep,
then really there's just a finite number of clients that you can realistically expect to take on each year.
Yeah, and that can't grow past a certain point, even if
No.
you're going to be someone who shoots 100 weddings a year.
No.
By yourself, you either got to have people to do them for you, or you can't shoot more than 100 just because there's only a certain number of days.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So today we just want to have a considered, kind of open and honest, hopefully useful for you discussion about pricing, so that hopefully it can be something that will provide a little bit of insight for you. Once again, based on the experiences that we've had over the past 5 years, right from the point of starting out to getting to a place where we can hopefully live comfortably going forward.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Although, it has to be said, having experienced a pandemic in that time, and previously, if we go way back when to when we decided to jump onto the property ladder, right about the time the financial crisis hit in 2008.
Yeah.
But we came out the other side of it. We survived.
Eventually.
So as part of the discussion today, we would like to give you some things to be able to consider when you're setting your own pricing, and think about how you might want to plan and progress this as you grow your own business.
Yeah.
So before we go any further, however, let's just be really clear about something. We are certainly not charging £10,000 plus for our services. And to be honest, although we take pride in our work, although I think that we love to continuously improve ourselves and develop ourselves, I don't think we're ever quite going to reach a point where we're going to be able to charge that amount either.
Yeah, and there's good reason for that. It's not just about ability, which is something we'll be discussing.
Yeah.
It's about what you're prepared to do for, to be able to earn a certain amount of money as well for a wedding. Yeah. So yeah, we're not saying that because we're sort of like, anybody who is charging 10,000, that's fantastic. Yeah. I think the reason we want to make that clear on although it's probably obvious we're not charging that. But the reason we want to make it clear is because I know that there's lots of stuff I listen to and watch online, where wedding photographers and videographers are talking about charging that kind of money or more. And sometimes I feel like that can kind of, to everybody who's listening, who's early on in their career, that could make them sort of be thinking, crikey, when you get to a certain point, does everyone charge this much? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because that's how they're talking about it. Whereas I think it's a very small percentage of people that are actually ever going to be charging that.
That's right, yeah. And I think, particularly here in the UK, there are only going to be a very small number of people within the population, if you like, who are going to have that kind of finance available to be able to spend that on one aspect or one wedding supplier, if you like. So one aspect of their wedding planning for photography or videography. There will just be a small number of people that are going to be able to do that. So rather than having a discussion today about here's how you pitch yourself and you sell yourself to the people who can afford to pay you that amount of money, we'd prefer to kind of have something that's a little bit more realistic and hopefully a little bit more productive, because we want to be able to focus around running a sustainable business for ourselves. And hopefully that's your aim, that's one of your goals as well. And collectively it's going to be something that we as a community are considering doing this, not only because of the finance or the money that we want to make for this, but because it's something that we enjoy doing as well. Yeah. So there's the side of it that we want to be able to make a living, have that business that has longevity, but also we're thinking about do we enjoy this and how long can we realistically sort of see ourselves doing for? Because as well as kind of providing enough or charging prices that are going to be able to maintain the costs of running your business, you also want to have enough there to pay yourself a salary that's going to allow you to enjoy your life outside of work. So whatever lifestyle you've become accustomed to and that you enjoy, and maybe even save for sort of future things that you might plan.
What, like retirement?
Retirement.
Or next year's holiday. Okay. So what you're saying is basically earn enough to run your business, have a reasonable wage, one that pays a bit more than the bills, and not worry about money too much. Yeah. Okay. So that is the upshot of it is, I mean, everyone's going to have a different motivation for doing this, and I do kind of appreciate that. Some people who are in camera-based industries, the photographers, filmmakers, there's I'm not going to go through the whole starving artist thing, but it's something that we hear all the time, and it's creativity and art is sort of like the priority. Straight up, I'm going to be honest, we don't come from that thing, that thought process. We like to be able to do something that's creative, and we like to be able to do something that we enjoy, because we've done other jobs that we didn't enjoy so much. Yeah. Might have enjoyed them at one point, but this is definitely better. But the point is, you have to, if you're going to do this as a job, if this isn't going to be just a hobby, you need to really think about making enough money for it to work for your lifestyle. And everybody's lifestyle is different, so we'll be talking about that sort of as we go through this. So the past couple of weeks, the reason I'm saying that is because the past couple of weeks I've seen a number of discussions in Facebook groups about pricing. There's been some concerns over the increases in cost of living and how that's going to impact things for business owners, but also how it might impact things for clients, couples, because our costs might go up. But also there might be there are people that are concerned that couples will be less likely to book, or they'll be less likely to pay more because everyone's finances are being squeezed. So it seems to be like a topic that's evoking a bit of emotion, strong opinion. It always does when it comes up. I think it's this time of year when it comes up, actually, when everyone's a bit quieter and they're thinking about these things, which is exactly why we're talking about it on the podcast.
Yeah.
So they're thinking about it. So, it gets brought up. So it's a good time to be thinking about it, but we don't want to just talk about it and it be like, this is my personal circumstances and this is yours and you charge this much and I charge that much and I'm right and you're wrong and da. It's more, we want to talk about the kind of theoretical and practical aspects of actually what are you going to charge, how are you going to arrive at that decision, because it'd be better if it wasn't just a random guess thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're not saying you should just raise your prices. You won't hear us say that. You will hear us say that you should charge based on what your own personal goals are, and also your own personal circumstances and your business and your ability. Yeah, that's what we're going to be going through. So it's about being considered and strategic, about making decisions about your pricing based on facts and taking opportunities to tactically raise your pricing if possible, because that's how you're going to improve the position of your business. It's not about ego, nor should it be about lack of confidence. So, what we're saying is it shouldn't be about penis swinging. I was going to use the word, I don't know, I didn't use the word dick, I don't know. But it shouldn't be about that. It shouldn't be about that, and it shouldn't be about the fact that you don't feel confident enough to raise your pricing. Neither of those things should be coming into this. It should be about going through the stuff we're going to talk about and actually arriving at what can I charge? What do I want to charge? And hopefully that's what people will end up paying because you've done your research and you've given it some thought. So the way we'll discuss it is based on sort of the challenges of pricing that we've experienced ourselves. Hopefully you'll be able to relate to that if you've already kind of gone through that a little bit, or if you're kind of new to this, it'll give you an insight into some of the things that you might end up facing and things you have to think about. So that hopefully you can think about what you're going to broadly charge for your services. We're going to base it on some business theory that we've learned, and some personal kind of non-bullshit experience that we've gained over the last 5 years, because we have asked ourselves all these questions and tried to work all this out. Like I say, it's not the easiest thing to find out because people don't talk about it in a practical way. If people are charging a lot, they usually like to tell you. If people aren't charging very much, they usually like to defend the fact that they're not charging very much. And the people that are in the middle, which is probably where we are don't want to talk about it too much because they see it as if I talk about what I'm charging, that's giving someone an opportunity to undercut me or whatever. So and
that's something we'll touch on actually, as we get a little bit just a kind of, you mentioned like the theoretical side of things. So it's always that with these podcasts, we aim to kind of bring a little bit of that, bring a little bit of kind of a
bit of Lyndsey's expensive business degree.
No, not just that, but there will hopefully I say hopefully in terms of the amount of listeners, but hopefully there will, over time, there will be people that tune into the podcast, and we'll have a nice range of kind of past experience, and so there could well be people that now are self-employed that previously have worked in industry or might have worked in strategic, easier for me to say, positions, who the kind of theoretical terminology, they'll be really au fait with that. For other people they won't be. So I think that really what we try to do is kind of just balance that right through what we're talking about, and just give that sort of little side of things, just to balance that, I think.
So, Linz, how do you feel about pricing? Like, I think the easiest thing, to do is like say, how do you feel, or how have you felt in the past? Not necessarily now, because I think we've both kind of got to a better place with it. But how did you feel in the past, especially for starting out?
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think of somebody who might be fairly new to this and is finding it really difficult talking to couples about money.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said just before there about lack of confidence, and that's, oh gosh, that's huge. Because and I'll just say this from my point of view, coming into this industry, learning a new craft, if you like, and then adopting that as your new profession, and turning that from something that you enjoy into something that you want to make an income from, has been a really challenging transition for me personally, because lack of confidence, imposter syndrome.
I was going to say, the imposter syndrome, like when it comes to money, you know, when it comes to kind of like being confident in your work, and when it comes to asking someone for money for it, or telling someone what you're going to charge, those are the bits out there where the imposter syndrome really kind of nips you. Yeah,
without a doubt, because because you are wrestling with the fact that you may be new to sort of doing this, you know. So I think naturally there will be lesser confidence there than, you know, perhaps what you will have specialised in, or whatever your profession was previously, or if it's something that, you know, you've really worked hard at educating yourself in, then you will kind of have that natural sort of confidence, and perhaps more easily adaptable to that transition. But yeah, gosh, something for me, it just felt so awkward. And the biggest worry actually was that, you know, we talk about not lack of confidence, but confidence. It's so important to be confident in what you are charging, because the last thing that you want to do is sit, not so much in recent years, of course, but, you know, the first sort of 2 or 3 years, we did so many face-to-face consultations with couples, and we met people at wedding fairs and things like that. So if you're stood there, and I'm someone that will go bright red if I feel embarrassed, and you know, if you're not
if you don't sound like you know what you're talking about, then how can you expect someone is going to hand over whatever you're asking? If you look and sound like, you know, you wouldn't believe yourself, you won't pay it yourself. So that's really important. And we're talking about that because if you are early on in this, or maybe even if you're going through the process of, you've been doing it a couple of years maybe, and you really want to be able to kind of push up the pricing, but you don't feel confident in doing that. Everyone's in the same boat. You need to know that everyone, and I'm not just saying that because we're saying it to you. I'm saying I've had these conversations privately with other people in the industry. It's everybody is back and forth with and that's something I'll touch on towards the end of this when I talk about our own journey, and that is that you end up shitting yourself when you put your pricing up when no one books straight away. And I'll go into it more in a bit, but it's pretty normal that happens, and you've kind of got, there's a whole thing you've got to go through to push through that. Okay, so moving on to the next bit, there's a long list of considerations that are going to help you determine your pricing. So this is a relatively short podcast. We're not pricing experts. You know, we've got a little bit of knowledge and experience, but we're not pricing experts. So we're not going to go through absolutely everything, but we're just going to talk about some basic principles and considerations that are relevant to wedding photography and videography. And hopefully that's going to help you determine what you should be charging for your services. We don't have the time to go into like all sort of pricing strategies and things that in depth, but we're just going to touch on stuff that's relevant to this. Yeah. So let's go through the basic considerations and variables that we feel will affect your pricing in wedding photography and videography specifically, but pretty much will apply to all aspects of the wedding industry, service-based, wedding industry, should we say. Okay, number one. So everyone's business every owner of a business's circumstances are different. So there's no like one size fits all. So your pricing's going to be likely to be influenced by your own personal and business circumstances and your own relationship with money, because whatever you've experienced, whether it's what you've experienced growing up and your parents' relationships with money and how much money you had as a family growing up, or whether it's as an adult you have been used to earning a particular amount, whether that is a fairly small amount or you've had a really good job and you've been earning a lot of money. Maybe your partner's got a really good job, or maybe you're on the breadline and you've always been on the breadline with stuff. All of that is definitely going to impact what you think about money and what money you need, what money you want. Because, it's we can't tell you. It's not for anybody else to tell you what you should earn or what you should charge. Some people, I do think that some people are just, I think about it like this. I think if one person is used to earning very little and has been able to live off that, they've been able to cover all their bills, they've been earning like a minimum wage or whatever, and they've been able to cover all their bills, and they've not needed to earn any more, and they've been happy earning that in whatever job it was they did, and then they come into photography or videography, and then they can earn the same or maybe a little bit more, but they're doing something they enjoy rather than whatever it was they were doing before that they didn't enjoy. Then they're going to see money in a different way. So earning £15,000 a year take home, a salary of £15,000 a year, if that's what you were used to before, that's going to seem like a really good salary for somebody who, who's now getting that from photography or videography. If you are somebody who has got a big house, much bigger bills, he's needs to earn 50,000 plus a year to be able to cover the bills, that your relationship's completely different. So in a nutshell, that is that's the difference, and that is how how hungry someone's going to be to earn more money, how motivated, how bothered they're going to be to earn more money. Some people might just want to do as little work as possible and have more time and not be too worried about money. So that's number one, personal circumstances and business circumstances. Number two, location, geography, and the market that you're operating in. So it's going to impact on your starting and your ceiling price, basically. I mean, if you're prepared to travel, then your location and the market that you live in is less of an issue. Because you can travel wherever. But obviously that isn't always that simple, because as the pandemic's shown us, if you are a destination wedding photographer or videographer, so you live like where we do in Yorkshire, but you do all your weddings in France or America or wherever, and that's what you're used to doing. So you're used to being able to charge more money because you travel, and then all of a sudden you can't travel because they've stopped everyone traveling, and you go, well, I've got to do my work locally. That's gonna really affect your pricing, because you might be used to being able to charge more. And so location does matter, because I'll tell you now, where we live in the north of England, you can charge, generally people will pay, the market pays less here than it does down south towards London in the south of England. And then obviously somewhere like certain parts of America, we know that, the like New York or somewhere like that, people, it's the done thing to pay a lot more for, it's just like any other job, isn't it? We have, in this country, we have London waiting salaries. So basically if you're working in London, in the centre of London, whatever job it is, you're probably going to get an enhanced salary compared to the exact same job in Leeds, near where we live.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's that. So location. So number 3 is there are different markets in the areas. I won't go into this massively, but a lot of people, you know, are going to get married across the world, in the country, whatever. Some are going to spend a few £100 in a registry office and a buffet at a local pub, and others will spend millions on the most lavish celebrations and everything in between. Like, there's going to be, between those two things, there are going to be all sorts of mini markets within markets. So, you know, a lot of the weddings that we will do are, you know, kind of, I would say mid to higher mid end.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the other weddings, the really, really lavish, expensive ones, and the really, really like low budget ones, they all need potentially a wedding photographer. Now, wedding videography, you could argue, is a little less mainstream. It's a little bit more of a special, you know, but it's becoming more mainstream as more people are having it. But, you know, effectively, most people are going to want some wedding photos.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and that's a conversation for another day, but thankfully we're starting to see the tide shift ever so slightly, because videography, you know, certainly in our earlier days, it would be something that we would hear people talk about as being a bit of a luxury. Yeah. And if they can afford it, they'll have one. But the photographer for the wedding
would always get booked, yeah.
Yeah, no brainer.
Yeah. So, you know, what people are wanting to spend on their overall budget at the wedding is definitely going to impact what they're going to spend on your photography and videography. Yeah. That's not exact science, because yes, there are some people that will do an elopement and they'll be having a very small and a very simple and not spending an awful lot on the actual wedding itself, but they might be, I want these most amazing images, videos, whatever, in this location. That's very different. That's not going to be the general wedding market. So that's kind of where we're coming from with that. You know, but there are these bands that kind of everyone's sort of operating in. Number 4, how good you are at what you do. Notice how this is the first point we're talking about, your actual craft, your actual photography or videography. So, you know, it's not the priority, I wouldn't say, that impacts your pricing. In our opinion, this is because, like, photography and videography is something that's subjective. So, you know, it's not fully understood by the masses. The technical aspects, the creative aspects of photos, you know, and videos, people, the mass population won't know the difference between. They'll know something that looks really, really bad, and they'll know something that looks really, really good. But the general thing in the middle of, like, the small, you know, the small kind of details, most people, I'm not saying everybody, but most people aren't going to know the difference. So whilst there's like an expected standard of competency, and believe me, there are some people working in the industry that don't meet that standard of competency, but they still manage to charge people for photography and videography. But the general population, you know, that are getting married, they're just going to be looking for that general standard of competency. And then, yes, they'll see differences in levels of work, but they'll more likely see things that they like and things that they don't like, rather than good and bad based on technical or creative things that we as photographers and videographers would look at. So it's less of an issue. It's more about reaching that standard of competency, and then, you know, some of these other aspects that we're talking about is going to determine price more than, wow, this is the most amazing video I've ever seen. Definitely. That's just our sort of view on it. It doesn't mean that if you're the best photographer or videographer going, that you're not going to, it's not going to, just because you're good doesn't mean you can charge more. It's basically, it's an accumulation of all the different things. That's
right, yeah. It's the other skills. It's your soft skills as well.
Which is the next part. Right. Number 5. Sorry, because I'm talking. We should have split this one up, shouldn't we? Because I'm doing all the talking this bit. People will be sick of it.
No, please go
on. What you're going to offer as a product or service, and what someone is willing to pay for it, is not just based on the output. It's based on like a set of attributes. So it's not because your work's just the best. It's because of personal taste. It's because things that might be to do with you as your personality. It might be to do with sort of a bond that they make with you. It might be to do with your reputation for customer service and your reliability, because these are things that people are likely to put weight on in terms of when they're choosing something. You know, these things are going to, those things are going to create higher value for them. If they can rely on you, they know you're going to give really good customer service. They think you're a really nice person and they really get on with you. Yeah. You know, the standard of your work will also come into it, but those things could alone help you charge more. Yeah.
And when we just go into, I'm sorry, just to interrupt.
That's all right.
So in a little while, when we just touch on the different kind of strategies or the different approaches to pricing, there's one particular type, and what is key to standing out with one particular strategy are all the things that you've just said there, just in that last segment. Because ultimately we'll find in some pricing tiers within the industry, the market is completely saturated. And so if you just rest your laurels on your pricing strategy alone, well, you're just one of a number in a sea of photographers and videographers. So it's those things that you have to consider. Could those be your USP?
Yep.
Could those additional things be the thing that sets you apart from your competitors? So an equal importance there, definitely.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Lindsey. The last part of that number 5, so it's the other attributes, is that there's also, so we talked about all of those things, but there's also the hype. So sometimes there might be a hype. So think about something that will be on telly, or something, a new thing, a new gadget comes out, or something that everybody wants, you know, Apple products, whatever, you know, when there's a hype of something, that can make it have a premium price as well. So if there's a hype about a particular photographer or videographer or something, you know, that they're doing, if they get recognised and they start to get noticed more on social media, that can help them to be able to charge more and things like that. Yeah. So that although that exists more within other industries, it does also exist in the photography videography industry. Yeah. So they're the sort of 5 basic considerations, just to recap. So we're going through circumstances of the business and the person. Number 2, location and sort of geography market. Number 3, the kind of sort of the band, the area within the market that you sit in. How good you are at what you do. And number 5 is going to be the other things that people will notice about your service that makes you stand out, or, as Lyndsey mentioned, USP. So, you know, looking at that, we need to decide how we're going to price our services, considering those things. And what's going to help us to do is to understand some basics of pricing strategies, which we're going to go into in a minute, and that'll help us sort of ask questions about how we're going to get to that figure that we're going to charge. Okay. But first of all, I just want to mention the sponsor of today's podcast, which is Divine Studios. Now, one of the things that's going to help you be able to charge more for your services is having strong professional branding, which communicates with your target client. Yeah. We're actually going through this process right now. We're sort of going through a bit of a rebrand and going to redo our website. We're working with Divine to do that. And that's because we are at a point where we want to reflect the extra value that we can bring to someone when hiring a wedding photographer or videographer. Yeah. So catching the attention of those looking for a competent and trustworthy supplier with a top quality service starts with first impressions. So before they've even looked at your photos, videos, read your about page, they're looking at how good you look online, or if they see a brochure or something like that. So having professional designers to develop your branding is a key investment in your business. we're proud to have Divine Studios sponsor the podcast. So if you're looking for your brand to stand out in the market, contact Divine for a no obligation consultation. And if you mention Word in Mavericks, you'll get a 10% discount on their services. Thanks, Divine.
Okay, so we've gone through the considerations that Jules has spoken about there related to what we want to or can change for our services. And it's also a good idea to establish a more organised approach for setting the amount that you want to be able to charge. Now, this is going to help us to be confident when we're discussing our price.
Important.
But it's also to know more strategically that we're going to be charging enough to run a sustainable business, as we've already mentioned. Yeah. And that's ultimately going to help us work towards the goals that we've set for ourselves and our future as well.
Which we went through in a previous podcast.
So rather than being really random, we're trying to base our prices on facts. And to be able to do this, we're going to take a look at some pricing strategies that are used kind of in the world of business. So anyone from a business background or an educational background might just be taking a deep inhale of breath thinking, oh, but there's loads. Oh, she's not going to go through them all, is she? Oh, my goodness. No, you will be very pleased to hear. We have just, for the purposes of speaking with you today, we've just kind of categorised them into 3 different categories, if you like. So that's just all I'm just going to touch on this afternoon. Jules has done a load of work on just preparing a document that will be available that we can share with you. Eventually
when we get the website sorted out, yeah.
Which does actually give you a nice succinct overview of the very different, those individual different pricing strategies. But for the purposes of today, let me talk to you first of all about cost-based pricing. So in a nutshell, cost-based pricing is whereby we're going to determine the price for our products or services by adding a profit element on top of the cost of either making the product or providing the service. So for example, let's say your product or service costs you £100 to be able to put together and deliver, okay? Cost-based pricing is about the markup that you will add to that to then determine what your selling price is going to be. So if we know it's going to cost us £100 to produce that, to prepare that and get that ready for sale, we're going to add, let's say, just to keep the figures simple, a 50% markup on that. Okay, so that means that our selling price then becomes £150. Nice and straightforward. Now, a great advantage of this for businesses is that you can rest assured, you can kind of have the confidence of knowing that the costs to your business have been covered in that selling price, because that was your starting point, wasn't it? That's what you worked out first. You thought about, how much is it costing me to ready this product or service for sale onto the consumer or your clients. So that's a nice reassuring advantage there. It's also worth considering the flip side of that, however. So to just be aware that if you haven't really considered, so I just plucked a figure out the air of 50% markup. If you've not really considered the suitability of that markup across your whole product range or across the whole list of services that you provide, you may find yourself in a position where you're not necessarily able to compete across the board if your competitors are lower. Okay, so if you just carte blanche decide 50% is my markup and you're not afraid to share those selling prices on your website, for instance, it's easy pickings for your competitors to take a look at that and think, well, I know what
I can do it for less because I'll just make less money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I suppose the thing about cost-based pricing on its own doesn't work particularly well for wedding photography and videography, because it, rather than being we can sort of define all the costs very simply, because we've got a workforce, we know how much we're going to pay them all, and we know how much the raw materials or whatever, you know, the raw thing costs us to make, and that it's all covered in that nice and simply. I suppose with cost-based pricing, with what we do, because of some of the variables we've already discussed, between, you know, you're not making a product that you're going to sell at that same price wherever you sell it in the world.
Yeah.
So that it's not straightforward.
No.
For this,
we're not making a batch of something, are we?
No,
we're not making.
And it's not something we can keep making, you know, and it never changes. There's not as many variables as there is in what we do. Yeah.
Okay, so that was cost based.
Yeah.
The next one, we focus more on the consumer here, so we come to customer based pricing, and in this case, your prices are going to be determined by what a business will believe that their customers are going to be prepared to pay for their product or services. So here's where we start to get some of the terminology, death by terminology, if you like, which I'm not going to go through all of. Funnily enough, they all begin with P, but you may hear...
P for pricing.
You might hear terms like penetration pricing, which...
Sounds dirty.
Honestly. Had to lower the tone.
I know.
But quite simply, that's when you will see this in shops when it might be a new product that's launched in a shop, and it's the special offer. It's the introductory offer of a low price that you might see, and we see that all the time in supermarkets and things like that.
I've seen some photographers and videographers doing it too.
Yeah. Price skimming is another one. Psychological pricing, you know, sounding very, very technical, very.
I know what you mean, though. So you're talking about like the penny off the pound, $12.99 instead of £13.
Absolutely. So I see less of those nowadays in terms of videographers, photographers. I see less of the £1,499.
Yeah,
for
but we've all done it,
and we've all done it. But it's around because it is that psychological thing of and actually funny. We were watching, just because we love business. We were watching The Apprentice last night, weren't we? And so in a group task, and this really made us chuckle. Because totally, you could see that the project team manager was totally thinking about psychological pricing when she was sort of putting this together for her team. So some team members decided or suggested a price of £80 per person to come on their experience. Project manager said, no, 75.
Yeah, and it was like, well, you're not going to win the task, like, you know, just changing it by a £5.
Yeah, and so they had to sell something like 16 tickets for this for an event that they'd planned. So really, you know, £5 knocked off, but she was adamant, and you could just see. I know it's edited in quite an amusing way but you could just see the kind of
everyone was
baffled
like,
looks on people's faces of, did she really just say £5 less? But do you know what? Hey. It could, you know, it's certainly a convincing thing for some people.
I think the psychological pricing thing, I think those tactics, what you've just been talking about, all of them are much more relevant at the lower end. When you're dealing with, and again, this is very broad. I'm not sort of stereotyping specifically, you know, a certain type of person, but people who are paying less for photography and videography, will probably treat it similar to how they would treat something in a shop or a supermarket. So those tactics might work on them. Whereas if you're charging more and you're looking for a customer that's going to pay more because they value it more, those tactics are less relevant, I would say. You don't need to use them, basically.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the third and final kind of strategy that I'll just cover briefly today with you is now the competitor-based pricing, where, as it says on the tin, you are going to determine your prices based on the influence of your competitors and what they are charging for their products or services.
Is this where everyone's nosy and wants to know what everyone else is charging?
Absolutely, yes. So, and I mean, from a consumer perspective, looking in on that, particularly so again, very easy to kind of liken this to photographers and videographers. So within our industry, consumers will find themselves looking through the market, looking through what's available, and there's going to be such a wide choice available for them. Yeah. And so just linking back to what I was saying before, and you were touching on, whether it's the soft skills, whether it's the relationship that you want to build over time with your clients, whether it's going the extra mile on the day, whether it's giving your customers an added little bonus of a few extra photos, or a little 1 minute teaser, for example, that they weren't expecting when they get their final product. As a professional in this industry, you need to think about where there is such a wide choice for the consumers, what's going to be the thing or the things that are going to make you stand out. In this sea of photographers and videographers, if we're all charging a really, really similar price, because everybody does their research, everybody looks at
and
what
if you're not,
the competitor,
you should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's looking at what one another are charging. So you have to think just really, really carefully then about what's going to set you apart from them. Now that could be, and the Simon Sinek readers or watchers amongst us will know about the why. What's your why? I've talked about your USP already, competitive advantage, whatever you want to call it. You need to really consider what's going to set you apart from your competitors. And just as Jules said in the 5 key things and considerations to think about there, that if you're going to look at something or a pricing strategy that is purely competitor based, you've got to look at what other value can you give to your clients? What else?
How do you stand out?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So there's tons of different strategies in there. Those three, they're just the sort of 3 kind of more common and broad strategies.
Yeah, they're like the categories and the kind of breakdown of the individual strategies are just
But essentially, we don't need to go into them all and explain them. But what we want to do is talk about the kind of strategy we use and why and how we've kind of got there. Okay, so I'm gonna call it the pricing Pincer strategy. Okay, because I wanted to make a funny name up for it. I've only made that up to have this conversation.
And we just like using lots of P's in this podcast, don't we?
But we've never actually used this. We've never called it a strategy. We've just used a set of attributes and considerations to come up with how we're gonna price. Yeah, and basically what we're trying to show you here is rather than just picking a figure out of thin air, do it. Have a real good think about it. That's what we're saying. So it comes from mixing the strategies we've just talked about, considering his own circumstances, and that's kind of why I'm calling it the Pincer, because you're kind of looking at what you can charge and how what you can kind of comparable to your competitors and things like that. What you kind of top level that you want to charge, and then what you need to charge and what you're able to charge based on the consumer and how much they're willing to pay. And it's kind of like this Pincer. So hopefully you come from bottom and top rather than just picking a figure. You come through pushing from the top and bottom and find what is the right balance for where you're at in your business at the time, which will change over time. Okay, so we're not a business that's looking to scale massively, and our goals are based on kind of lifestyle rather than large profit. We're not aiming to make tons and tons of spare money. We want to have a nice balance of time and enjoyment, as well as being able to live a comfortable life. So balancing that revenue with with time is basically the key. So what we're going to consider, we can't go into all the details. I might do a little mini episode where we talk about in more detail costs and things like that. But here we go. So we're going to think about the costs, and this is kind of going to be your floor pricing. Yeah? Yeah. So whatever it costs you to do your business, you need to work that out. And if you're not working these things out, you really, that's the biggest mistake. first of all. And I'm not saying this lightly, because I'm actually saying it because I believe that people don't think about these things. Some people will be running their business and they won't actually be actively considering all these things. They'll just be looking at whether the bank account's got any money in it or not. They won't be thinking about, am I charging enough to be able to keep that bank account in the right place, rather than constantly, going into overdraft or whatever. So the bottom line is we need to know what the business costs are. And in that, we need to know what part of the business costs, what we need to take out of the business as a bare minimum. So what we need to pay our personal bills. Yeah? And that's going to be different for everyone. We've set up a limited company, whereas if you're a sole trader, it's a little it's a little less structured, because you even though you should be keeping them separate, your business finances, your personal finances can merge a little bit more. Whereas when you're a limited company, you've definitely got to be strict about paying yourself a salary and dividends if that's what you're doing. So as part of the pricing, I say I'll just run through them really quick, but you need to be thinking about these in much more. We can go into much more detail on maybe a separate episode. So your equipment, you're not going to have to buy that all the time, but you are going to need setup costs. So like setting up equipment and setting up with other things. And then you're going to want to be able to put some aside and have some aside for maintenance and upgrade of that equipment at various intervals. I can't tell you what that is. We can't go into that in detail, but I can, on a separate one, I can give you a little bit more insight into, how often you're going to really need to spend and what you're going to likely need to spend. And that's going to be different for everyone, because some people are happy to just use, the very kind of basic of what they can get away with. And some people are trying to create something else. So they might want extra pieces of equipment or higher quality equipment. Running costs like premises. So like, if you've got an office, if you've got some costs of somewhere where you work, or if you work from home, you're going to be using electricity and things like that. So an office, got to think about transport. Are you running a car or whatever, van for your business, or are you paying yourself mileage? But you're going to need to have that, because if you can't get to things, you're screwed out. You're not going to be able to do your job. Website. Whether you do that by yourself, you have someone build that for you, and hosting and things like that. But that's a really important tool, because most of us are going to be getting, without that, we're not going to really have a business these days. Communications, so mobile phone, broadband, things like that. Subscriptions, that covers so many things. But for instance, we use CRM, we've got Adobe subscriptions, music licensing. We upload, we host our films and photos on galleries and things. We have to pay for all this stuff. You need to know what these costs are, so that you've taken this into consideration. Marketing and client acquisition. This is a big one. This is a big one that I don't think people budget for. I think people hope that their clients are just going to come to them. Any other business other than this, they will have a marketing budget. Right? You should, in my opinion, our opinion, you should have a marketing budget for your photography, videography business. It just basically means that you can actually determine with some success that you're going to have a business and you're going to get clients in the future. If you're leaving it up to organic, you're not in control of it. It can stop, it can start, it can dry up. It could be in abundance, but you're not in control of it, because it's down to other people, third parties. Insurance, banking, accounting, and other professional services. Again, another time. Basic wages for yourself. Tax, national insurance, VAT if you're earning loads and you kind of need to pay that. So that is basically your floor pricing, and that is a lot to consider, isn't it? Now we've got a spreadsheet with all this on, and we know what that costs, and we know what that costs over the course of a year. And we can track that as well. We can also, as well as tracking it, we can also project it. So we know in advance what it's going to cost us for that sort of stuff. Right, competitors. So first strand, costs. Second strand, competitors. So competitor analysis is a must within your local area, having an awareness of who's out there. But also the national and international markets. So, you know, knowing that if you're willing to travel, that what you could charge in different areas potentially, and knowing what people are charging. You know, maybe there are people that you really follow and you aspire to be like. You want to know what they're charging or have a rough idea what they're able to charge. It's if nothing else, it's a goal to aim for, isn't it? Or an aspiration to have. Yeah. But you should have an awareness. It might be quite hard to get people's pricing if they don't have it on the website, and it's a bit daft and sneaky if people are like sending fake inquiries to try and find out. I know it happens. But, you know, trying to find out, and this is why we should all be kind of a bit more open about it maybe, because if we actually all turn around and say we're looking at how much we all should be charging as like a minimum, you know, that it sort of creates a bit of a standard for the industry. I don't expect it to happen, but I do think it'd be beneficial if it did.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you kind of, you know where you're competitive, when you're competitively pricing yourself or not. And the reality is, as you start out, you will need to be more competitive than when you've established yourself. Yeah. So you know, undercutting, as much as I'm not, you know, a massive kind of fan of it, it kind of has to happen for the people who are just starting out, because people they don't have any way to sort of get people to pay them the full amount at that point.
So it's looking back at that kind of cost-based pricing where that's your focus.
That's your minimum, and then you can charge smaller amounts of profit. And obviously, as you progress, you're gauging your value proposition in the market, and you can decide whether you're offering something that sets you apart, and that's where the competitive pricing comes in.
Yeah.
Okay, the next strand is your customers. So to begin with, you're probably just going to want people to hire you, need a photographer or videographer. Someone's getting married, basically. You need to you need to build a portfolio. You need to earn a little bit of money to start with. But as your business progresses, you're probably going to want to appeal to a more specific client. And who are these people? You know, these are the considerations you're going to have to think about. And you're probably going to arrive at that by doing like a target market kind of analysis. You're going to do an ideal client profile, persona. These things we'll probably cover in a future episode, but these things are going to help you to price as you go forward.
Yeah.
When you start out, you probably are just looking for whatever you can get. But don't stay like that for too long.
No.
The next strand, profit. So investing into your business. You want some money to be able to invest back into your business. You want some money to be able to benefit personally. So, you know, you've got your basic, what I need to make so that I can pay the bills. Yeah. And then you've got the bit where, well, maybe you want to be able to save up to go on travel, or you want to be able to save up to buy a new car, or you want to be able to save up to put a deposit down on a house. To benefit you personally, you're going to need to factor in not just what the basic amount is that you need to take out of the business to cover those costs, but you need to be able to say, well, if I want to save X amount of £1,000 a year, I need to make sure that's built into my profit margins.
Yeah.
And planning for the future. So again, if you're in your 20s and you're just starting out, you might not be thinking about it too much, but certainly at our age, we have to think about when we retire. The sooner you think about that, the better. And you need to be able to put some money away into some kind of investment, pension, whatever it is. But that's something you need to be able to do. And these are things that people are just not thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah, you find if you were to think, you know, so again, just trying to kind of think about the broad range of professionals that we might well have listening to this, right from perhaps graduates to people who have had a career in different professions, again transitioning into something completely new. Well, if you were, when you're an employee, when you're employed, then the contributions that are taken out of, or rather the deductions, that are taken out of your wage,
into a pension or whatever.
You are enrolled into a pension scheme. There might be other benefits as well that the company that are paying your wages that they allow you to contribute towards, that could look at all aspects of your sort of health and well-being or your future financial security and planning. So those things happen, whether you kind of you I guess you kind of fully realise that, or you appreciate that at the time, but those things are happening, and those are part of the deductions that come from your wage. Well, when you become self-employed, they don't become any less important, but it's definitely, and like you said about the finances, when you're a sole trader entering into this industry, to begin with, the waters are muddied when it comes to your finances, because unless you consciously from the off are creating a separate bank account that the income from your self-employed business is going to be paid directly into, it all goes into the same pool of money.
Yeah.
And so
you just take out money as you need it from the business rather than paying yourself a set amount every month.
Yeah.
That's not really a good way of doing it, but I know that it's what a lot of people probably do.
Yeah. And so if you're not considering that, you're not considering what the deduction should be also.
Yeah, your percentages of how much you'll put aside for this and aside for that.
Yeah. So it's really important, because if you've made the decision to become self-employed, future-proofing yourself, in terms of your own financial well-being and your own financial security is incredibly important and not to be overlooked.
Yeah. So I appreciate it's gone quite a long time now, but we're coming towards like the sort of final bits. So the next strand to think about is your positioning. So this is where you're going to position yourself in the market. And again, this is actually going to be based on your own personal circumstances, your business preferences, because, what you want to do, if you live where we live in the north of England and you don't want to do a lot of travel because you've got 2 young kids, for instance, then you might be doing less travel down to the south of England or destination weddings abroad. And that's going to, you're going to decide that's where I'm positioning myself. I'm going to work in this part of the country most of the time. And that will affect probably the ceiling price that you are likely to be able to get paid for doing what you do. And you're not doing any different a job. Your work's no different necessarily. But, if you did it somewhere else, if you were happy to travel, you might be able to get paid a little bit more. And these things are going to affect what you should or what you can charge. So the market, is going to be based on what you want from that, and there's expectations when you work with certain people. So if you're working with higher end clients, there's going to be a different set of expectations, and you're going to have to carry yourself differently. You're going to have to brand yourself differently potentially, and these things are personal circumstances and personal preferences for how you run your business. And if you go through a branding process like the one we're going through now, you're having these conversations about, I want to work with these people. Those people might not be the wealthiest clients. So it's a balance of that. So once we've got all the information from these considerations that we've just discussed, and again, we will try and put a bit of a document together for you to sort of see these if it helps. We're going to know, and we're going to sort of establish what our target revenue is. And the target revenue is something we talked about in the last episode, and it's basically what you are aiming to earn based on your personal circumstances and your business costs. So what you want to be able to pay yourself, you need to earn that plus your business costs. And you get that figure, and then there's a table, and we'll put it up on screen for people that are watching video, and we'll eventually, when we get the website set up, we'll make this available. It's a very simple table, but it's something that I think is quite effective because it basically has the number of weddings down one side and it has the amount you charge on the other, like an axe to the two different axes. And what that enables you to do at a very simple kind of visual glance is go, well, if I pick an amount, so let's say it's £50,000, that's what your target revenue is for the business. You can easily see at different amounts that you charge how many weddings you're going to have to do. So, you know, it's perfect in that if you want to do 50,000 weddings at £1,000, if you want to earn £50,000, sorry, if you want to earn £50,000, 50,000 weddings, man, how are you going to do it? If you want to earn £50,000 and you're charging £1,000 per wedding, you do 50 weddings. Obviously, that's a very simple sum, but then it gets more complicated, obviously, if you start looking at like charging 3,500, and by looking at this table, you can easily see, all right, well, that means I do 30 weddings, it means I do 20 weddings, whatever. And it just helps you to see visually what you should be charging based on what your revenue target is. Yeah, that doesn't mean that's what you should charge. It just helps you to, because that's where we should be kind of focusing things and engineering it the other way. How I want to charge this much. How do I get there? Yeah, that's the crux of it.
And just to interrupt you. So just to kind of link it back to what we were talking about on last week's podcast, we used that visual aid with the wall planner. So when you come to this point of looking at, you've considered what your costs are, you've considered what you want to earn each year, then thinking back to, okay, well, if I want to earn this amount of money or I need to earn this amount of money per year, that equates to 40 weddings for me this year.
Yeah.
You go back to your wall calendar.
Can I do it?
Can I do this? Can I realistically fit this in with other perhaps work commitments, with other personal commitments that I've got? But you're kind of combining the two different approaches there to your target setting in terms of how many weddings do you want to work on per year, and then how does that factor when we're sort of considering the pricing strategy that you're implementing. Yep.
And sort of the another strategy that this can help you to use then is something called dynamic pricing. And that basically means you can change your pricing at different points, almost as like an experimentation. Yeah. And this is a way where you can get to put your prices up with like kind of a low risk strategy. And what you're doing by knowing your numbers, knowing what you've got to achieve, you've got to have a figure of like, this is how many weddings I can possibly do. This is the target to earn that sort of money. And then you will know that when you're getting close to that, so say like your target's 30 weddings for the year, and when you're getting to like 25, you book 25 and you've got, another sort of, you've got the whole year, 12 months to still book weddings, you know that you can probably take a few more risks. And you know as well that you've kind of met that base price, that base revenue figure. So it just allows you to be able to do that. And the idea being that over time, you can do fewer weddings, and the byproduct of that is by charging more and doing fewer, you're typically going to, your quality of your work's probably going to go up because you're going to have a bit more time to spend on it. Yeah. So the aesthetics of how that's going to look. And then there's things like the venues and the couples, where as they're paying more money, they tend to just be a little bit easier to work with. Things tend to look a little bit better. All of it kind of influences and goes to actually making your work look and feel better for the future. So it's kind of, the byproduct of all of that.
And you get the additional bonus, of course, of that's just just adding to the fact that you're going to be enjoying what you're doing all the more. Plus, if there's a little bit more downtime there across the year for you because you're doing fewer weddings, that's just adding points on the side of, when we were talking about well-being last week, that's helping all towards that. Exactly. Spending more time doing other things that you enjoy and not just working all the time. Yeah. balance.
Yeah. So it's not just a case of suggesting that everyone does fewer weddings. It's about a journey through your pricing. It's almost like changing seasons of your business. You go through different kind of stages of growing your business. And the aim is to run a sustainable business so that you can still be doing what you love doing in the future whilst living comfortably, not getting burnt out, not getting disillusioned, and not having an unprofitable business and not being able to pay the bills. Yeah. So in which point you're not going to be doing it anyway.
Yeah.
So, for us, started off, did a couple of free ones, charged 500 quid for a few. We're stuck in the kind of, we spent a bit too long for my liking in the kind of around £1,000 territory. Not ages, not very long at all, but just knowing what I know now, we could have put the prices up quicker. And that for me, you want to get to that kind of £1,500 and above price range, particularly for wedding videography, but also for photography, as soon as possible. And that 1,500 to £2,000 is that's a kind of a nice place to be. Quite straightforward in terms of being able to ask people to pay that. Yeah. And when you start going over the 2K mark, which is where we've been now for a while, just for one service, just for photo or video, and obviously we do both together. So if we're doing both together, we're kind of pushing, between 3 and 4, maybe a bit more, depending on the situation. And the reason I'm saying it's hard, you want to get to that 1,500 to 2, because that's from what we've experienced, that's a decent place to be. It's quite straightforward to attract clients. Clients are happy to pay it. But as soon as you start going over that 2K, you've got to do a lot of things as well, in addition to just being to attract that. And we'll probably talk about that in a different episode. So that's basically the little journey we've been on and why we feel like we can talk about all that stuff, because it's things that we've had to consider.
Yeah.
Right. So... yeah, sorry I had to rush that last bit. I didn't mean it to be this long.
But I think that seems like a good place to wrap it up for this week. As always, we really hope that's been helpful for you. That's been useful in some way. And please, we always encourage, if you have any questions, comments or suggestions of your own in relation to pricing or in the more general sense of the podcast in its own right, please get in touch with us. Send us a DM on Instagram, look for us on Facebook at Wedding Mavericks. We absolutely would love to hear from you.
Yeah. We've got a website as well that we'll be updating in the next few weeks. If you want to visit us there, it's weddingmavericks.com. If you want to listen to any future episodes, please follow or subscribe us to wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to watch us, we've got a YouTube channel as well. And you can check that out at Wedding Mavericks.
Yeah. And just before we go, I'd just like to say, I know we both sort of want to recognise this over the past couple of weeks. And so we've just been doing this together for a couple of weeks. But Jules did this last year as well. And it's been really nice, actually, just hearing from some of you. We've had some really lovely messages, really amazing messages over the past couple of weeks, which we really appreciate. So thank you to everybody that's been listening to the podcast or who has watched us on YouTube so far and are going through the kind of back catalogue from last year as well. We really do appreciate it. It does really mean a lot to us, and that's why we encourage any kind of feedback, your questions, comments, things like that, because it helps us kind of shape and think about what issues are important to you and the things that we need to address in future podcasts.
Absolutely.
As part of this community. So thanks again to all of you for supporting us so far, and thank you once again to Divine Studios for sponsoring our podcast today. We will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.
See ya.